And I want to welcome you all, and for a change that wasn't as long a dead silent part as usual. Yeah, welcome. I love that we get people from all over the world to these broadcasts. I know for some of you it's very early in the morning or very late at night, and it's very humbling to me that you're taking the time out of your busy day or staying up or getting up so that you can be here. Thank you for that. And I do try very hard to make these free video lessons have useful content for you every week. So we're going to get started in just a moment. I wanted to share something though. You know how when you're thinking about a topic or you learn something new and all of a sudden it's everywhere? It just, I'm sure that the Germans have a word for it because they have a word for everything. And I don't know what it is, but you know, it's just that synchronicity of when you have that thought and then you see it everywhere you go. And I've been thinking about that lately because I guess I've been thinking about the topic of confidence in art. And then I've been reading a book, Watercolour 365 by Leslie Redhead. And Leslie's actually a friend of mine. I'm going to review this book in a separate live broadcast after this one closes. So hang around when we finish up here and I'll be talking about this book a little bit more. But I just wanted to read to you one thing from the book before we get started. And she has a little title here, a little heading called "Fake It Until You Become It," and she talks about the need for confidence as we approach our painting. And a lot of times for you guys, if you're just getting started, if you haven't been painting very long, if you're starting a little later in life, you might be struggling with feeling confident in what you do. You might not feel like you have the right to call yourself an artist, or that you shouldn't be showing your work to people, or shouldn't even be talking about it, as talking about your art. And I think most of us have that feeling of not really quite being what we're presenting to the world. And I want to encourage you, that is my life too. When I do a demonstration on live on video or in one of my courses, I'm very aware that I am not done learning this topic, and I'm not even sure it's going to turn out this time, and here I'm recording it. And so it can be a little bit scary, and I just kind of pretend that that isn't there. And that's really what Leslie says in her book here too. She says, she's quoting Amy Cuddy, a psychologist, and she says, "Don't fake it until you make it. Fake it until you become it. Do it enough so that you actually become it and internalize it." And so Leslie says, if you don't feel like an artist, keep on faking it until you become the artist you really want to be. And I think to some extent we have to do that. We have to have this boldness to say, I love what I'm doing. I'm going to own it. I'm going to do it. And in the process, I'm going to become what I dream of being. And so I want to encourage you to think of it that way. And then, because as soon as you hear one topic, you see it everywhere else. In my day planner, I always use the Polestar family calendar, and they have inspiring quotes every week. And this one is a quote by Tim Ferriss, and he says, "If you're insecure, guess what? The rest of the world is too. Do not overestimate the competition and do not underestimate yourself. You are better than you think." And I love that quote because we forget sometimes that those little small feelings inside of us that make us feel small, everybody else is facing those too. No matter how important they seem, they know the real them inside doesn't always measure up to that image they're projecting. And we're all doing that, and knowing that gives us that understanding that we're kind of all one together. So I want to encourage you guys, we are all in this together. I'm learning. Just because I'm a little farther along in the journey than you might be, it certainly doesn't mean that I know everything or I have all this confidence. I'm just kind of faking it, and I love being able to share this together. So we're gonna move over to my work surface here in just a second. Today's video topic is called Crazy Simple Landscapes, and I actually stole that title from my new online course, Photo Reference Mastery. I added that lesson titled Crazy Simple Landscapes, and I thought, I love the title, I love the concept, and so we're going to do a little bit of it today, and I do talk about it further in Photo Reference Mastery, so we'll talk about that in just a minute. I'll tell you a little bit more about the course as we do our painting here. really with Crazy Simple Landscapes, it's really just about simplifying and editing your photo reference or your inspiration image and having some fun with it. So we're going to have some fun and get creative. And welcome to those of you who are just joining right now. I'm just moving my camera. If you hear thumping, that is why. Crashing or banging. I'm going to get it set up right over my painting surface. And that will give us all a good view of what, there we go, of what we're working on today. Joe's going to copy down questions that you might have throughout the broadcast, so that those will come up towards the end. I'll try to answer any direct questions you might have. Thank you for taking the time to do that, Joe. I have two photos here, and we're going to talk about them one at a time, actually. Crazy Simple Landscapes. I love a simple landscape because there's so many options with it. And when I think of a simple landscape, I generally think of a horizon line, I think of land, and I think of sky. And here in the area I live, we have a lot of kind of prairie farmland. So that means we have a lot of possibilities for crazy and wonderful skies. I also see there's a little UFO here in the corner where I think my printer had a little glitch. What generally happens when I start painting a landscape is I keep it pretty simple. We're going to just pretty close to the reference image. And I will actually link up some of these reference photos after the broadcast, so if you want to try painting them, you're sure welcome to do that. But we're going to start here. I don't have a lot of blues in the two palettes I brought today, so we're just going to use the blues that are here. I have Verditer blue. You know what, I don't even have phthalo turquoise, so we're just going to, or I have ultramarine blue, not even Verditer. So we're going to use the ultramarine, and we're going to paint our sky. And I haven't wet my paper down, I'm just working straight on the dry paper. There's not really a lot of clouds in this scene. I'm going to stand up because I always do better painting when I stand up. I am able to work from my shoulder instead of from my wrist, so I have a looser range of movement, more of a range of movement. And I think I also have a better perspective on my painting because I'm looking down on it from above instead of sitting at an angle. Okay, so there's my ultramarine. I'm actually not even thinking about my buildings because we're keeping things simple, so I'm just going to do a straight line for horizon, and it's pretty much dead center today, which again, with a simple landscape, you get to choose that. And then I have this yellow field, and the yellow is actually canola, rapeseed, I think it's called in Europe. And it blooms very brilliant yellow and then gets really stinky when it starts to dry off and mature. So you have your window open to see the beautiful yellow in the summer, and then you close it when they start smelling. And so I'm going to put the yellow in there. Down in the foreground I have, again, just a little bit of weeds and a ditch there, and there's actually a little piece of road, but I'm going to kind of ignore some of that. I don't like putting a lot of detail down in the corners of my foreground. Oh, I'm going to push up so you guys can see that. I don't like putting a lot of detail down in the bottom of my painting because I feel like it pulls the eye down. I've left a gap here because I know that if I touch my paint to my sky, it's going to bleed. And not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but the longer I wait, the less it's going to bleed. So that means I have waited now. I can now choose my green. I'm using just a little bit of green gold and a little bit of dirty green from my palette to darken it up a bit. And then I can put that band of green right in here. And at this stage, because the paint has had some time to soak in, it's not going to bleed nearly as much, but it is going to bleed a little, and that gives me a pretty soft edge that maybe looks like trees or shrubs or something, bushes in my scene. So that's a very simple landscape, and I love distilling the landscape down to those simple objects. If I'd wanted to paint my barn and my house and the trees, I probably would have planned to leave a little bit of white space there and paint around some of those shapes. The barn and the house are actually kind of silhouetted against the sky, so I could actually put them in now. or after this has dried, because I'll want a crisp edge for that. So I'm going to set this aside and move over to another sheet of paper, because what I love to do is I love to challenge myself. I start with keeping fairly close to the original reference, and I think that's usually our default, is really leaning on our reference photo for information about our scene. But then you start to think, well, what if things were just a little bit different? What if I use the reference photo as a general guide? And I think it's a lot easier to do this when our painting is simple, when we have just land and just sky. So we're, again, still looking at this scene, thinking, what if I change things up? What if I tried a different blue? And I've got a couple of blues in here that I almost never use, and so I don't know them very well. So let's get to know them by doing some crazy simple landscape painting with this blue apatite, I can't pronounce it. And look at how stormy that goes down on my sky. So suddenly my whole painting is going to change because I'm using this different shade of blue. And I'm dripping right on my photo. I'm not going to worry about that. And I think that if I'm choosing a dark and stormy blue, I'm going to want more sky. So maybe I'm going to decide to lower my horizon right down to here. And that's going to give me an interesting sky, a feeling, oh, that almost looks like a tornado. And this blue apatite gives, really granulates, ultramarine granulates a little bit. You get the little sediment particles, but the apatite, I'm going to commit to saying it that way, because I don't know how else to pronounce it. And the blue apatite really granulates. It's a really sedimentary color where you see a lot of those little particle pieces. So I'm going to just put a lot of water on there and give those sedimentary particles a chance to flow. And they make a lot of little tracks and blotches in my scene, which I think is really interesting. Let's put a little bit more on. And then I'm going to add another color. I think another kind of stormy color is this Moon Glow by Daniel Smith, and it's right beside the blue apatite. So let's add some of that Moon Glow in. If we're doing a stormy scene, we might as well go all the way and really commit to it. And I think, if I had raw sienna here, I'd want to add that as well. And I don't have raw sienna, which is a shame, because it would be, I think it would be a kind of a cool, it would add a cool kind of greenish, grayish color to my sky. So I'll have to try that on my own at another time. So that gives me some really interesting clouds, and I could take a tissue at this stage and maybe blot a little bit to give me some lighter areas. I don't have paper towel today, I have tissue. If I have to sneeze, I'm going to be in trouble. And so that blotting gives me a whole, a little bit more dimension, a little bit more contrast between my light and my dark, which I think is really fun. Now, what would my canola field look like if I had this dark, stormy sky? Would it be this brilliant yellow? It would probably be a little bit murkier. So we're going to take that same original yellow that we had and tone it down a bit. And I think a good way to tone down yellow, especially if you don't have kind of a muted yellow, again, raw sienna is kind of muted, so that would be a good one to choose. But I'm going to just add some dioxazine violet, some Winsor violet to my yellow. This is kind of an orangey yellow, so you could also add a little bit of blue, maybe the ultramarine. And let's throw that down. And that's going to give my field a much more subdued feel. If I painted with that brilliant yellow, I think on this scene right here, I think what would happen was you would feel like sun was shining from somewhere. So you'd be like, well, here's these dark storm clouds, but there must be still some sun somewhere. And that is a whole different atmosphere you can create just by changing up how you paint your clouds. So I'm kind of liking just the simplicity of here, this dramatic sky, and yeah, beautiful dramatic sky, and then this muted landscape. And I'm really liking this area where I blotted with the tissue, because when you blot, you also create edges. By removing water from here, the moist color that was here creates an edge, and that gives me a really neat cloud shape. You would almost feel, I almost feel like this is a big tornado coming down, and we don't get tornadoes where I live, so that's not very possible, but it gives that feeling of this drama that's happening. And I think if you put a house in this scene as compared to the original sunshiny version, you would have like a much more foreboding feel, and it would feel like kind of, I don't know, haunted house or something like that. So I love the fact that you can change your mood just by changing up your colors. And this is a very dramatic scene that tells a story, even though there's really just sky and land. And I haven't added any green to my landscape here because I really just like this band of color. It's very simple and keeps the eye looking at the sky, which is the star of the show. If you like really simple landscapes, one artist I love to follow is Tom Hoffman, and he does some really cool stuff with just big dramatic brush strokes, simple shapes and colors, really simple landscapes that have a lot to say. Okay, we're going to move on. Sky and landscape doesn't have to be flat and straight. Here I have a hill, and I think this was photographed in southern Alberta. We were headed down toward Waterton National Park, and I think this was just close to Lethbridge, Alberta, when we drove through here. And I'm running out of paper here today, and so often what I'll do is I'll take, especially when I'm painting something that's really simple and kind of exploratory, is I'll take a piece of scrap paper like this that has a little bit of dirtiness on it, and I'll use that for my scene, because you can do some interesting things with mistakes or splatters on your paper. And so we're just going to, I was looking at the other side to see if there was anything I wanted to keep, but it's just kind of doodles, and so we'll just leave it. I'm seeing a few questions coming up. We're going to save, Joe's hanging on to those to save for the end. So we're going to again take our original reference photo, and I will give you a link so that you can download this photo to paint if you'd like to at the end of the broadcast as well. And what I like about this scene is we have very blue sky and lots of clouds, and then a very neutral and subdued hillside. So we're going to try and keep it simple, just like the original image. And I get to show you my favorite mixture for those great cloudy grays that we see there. First, I'm just going to quickly clean a spot of my palette. And I'm using the colors I have available today. You know what, most of the time in my studio I have about 6 palettes, and I can just pick from probably at least 100 colors. You know, pick the 5 or 6 I want to use for that painting. It is nice sometimes to limit yourself, and I'm trying to decide, we're packing for a family holiday, and I'm trying to decide how much paint to bring. And I'm very tempted to just bring my little mini Winsor & Newton travel palette, which just has 8 little pans, but I would bring another brush because the tiny little brush that comes with it just doesn't really suit me very well. You know, I like a big brush. Debating. I might bring it. I might bring more than just that, or I might just bring it and then decide to do a little bit of art supply shopping while we're down on our trip. So right now I'm just going to paint my big clouds. This dirty spot is going to become a nice gray shadow, so I'm keeping that in mind as I start painting the blue areas around my clouds. And those are the strongest areas of blue. And then once I put that color down, I soften it with a clean brush. I start adding a little water and letting that color flow. And that's why I use a large and juicy amount of paint on my brush when I'm painting. I want to be able to put some color down, and here I'm getting a little bit of an edge, so I'll just put a little more paint there. And then if you wait too long, it does want to dry and leave that crisp edge. That really also depends on your climate. I'm going to add a little burnt umber to my ultramarine mixture here, and burnt umber is my favorite color to mix with ultramarine or cobalt to create a stormy gray. And look at what a lovely gray that makes. So that can give me my clouds, and I think I'm pushing the shadows that I see in my reference just a little bit. I'm exaggerating them. I like doing that. if I can see something in my scene, why wouldn't I just want to paint more of it? A little moreish. And there's more gray clouds over on this side. And when I'm painting a lot of clouds like this, I kind of give myself permission to drip in a little water too. Those drops of water could create blooms, and those blooms will create more texture in your clouds. So they're not necessarily a bad thing. So that's probably as far as I want to go with that. I could go with drama, and I think if we're being crazy and doing crazy simple landscapes, let's be dramatic. So let's add some bolder color and let it whoosh across the page. Let's make our grays grayer and our blues bluer. So now I'm getting more of the darker gray. So our sky is definitely going to be the star of the show when you have those large amounts of contrast and shadow. And I think what I need to do right now is just let it roll a little bit, let it flow. And that might involve a little bit of tilting. Maybe a little bit of water to encourage some things, some colors to mingle and create those blooms that we were talking about. Very dramatic. And then anytime you're painting hills, which is our next step, I'm just going to go a little bit browner. I'm adding more brown to my gray, the gray that I mixed with my ultramarine and my burnt umber. And then I think I'll add a little bit of, trying to think, it needs to be kind of lighter and maybe almost greenish. I'm going to add a little bit of Nicolazo yellow and see what that does. And that gives me it gives me a bit of a warmer, I think that's the color I want. This gray up here is a very cool gray, but by adding some yellow to that mixture and a little bit more brown, I really warmed it up. So you can see I'm getting a much warmer color. So my landscape then will look different. It'll look like a separate thing from my sky, even though in a few places it's going to bleed a bit. And that gives me my little bit of tufty shrubs that are kind of along the top here. The other thing is we have contours that we see by variation of value. Darker area here shows a little dip in the landscape. Here this is quite light and alkaline there, and so that's almost a white. And so I know that by varying my value, I give clues about the shape of my landscape. And that's going to really flow, so I'm going to tilt again. And I'm not using a painting board today because I keep forgetting to bring one in from the studio. So that makes this a little bit awkward. It's much easier to tilt your board if you have a board. Adding a little more water. And this is kind of a first layer kind of thing. Those contours can be created further by letting them dry and then painting them in. Because right now, putting a little masking tape under there, that gives me my tilt so things continue to flow downwards. And right now this is very soft. You don't see the angles of the landscape, so I wait for it to dry and then I paint that stronger, darker contrast between sky and land. The land looks very dark where it touches the sky, where it's silhouetted against the sky, and then quite a bit lighter down below where the contours start to change. So that's one, again, another version. We have a very cool sky and very warm land, and we can change that up. We can try a purple hillside and kind of a yellowish sky, which actually I've been having a lot of fun painting a yellow sky lately. It's amazing what a yellow sky will say, and I'm just looking to see if I have a scrap of paper I can show you with. And this is, again, another scrap, and I never waste my paper. This is a landscape I started, just demonstrating how you can do a first layer sketch in a very light color to show where everything fits together. I have hills here, so I think I'm going to use this for my yellow sky. I'm going to turn it upside down and grab that murky yellow that I used for my dark field in this one. I still have it in my palette, so I'm going to use it. And I'm going to add a little more color to it, same mixture that I started with. And that dioxazine violet is so vibrant that it just takes over. You only need a tiny bit or you end up with way too much. Okay, well that's much more brilliant yellow than ordinarily I would maybe choose for painting a yellow sky, but I think we can get away with it. So I'm painting around my clouds once again, and we're going to use some of these contours to create our hill. And I'm going to use some clean water to soften those edges, just like I like to do. Put my clouds down. And then I can decide, do I want to add some violet and let the violet mix with, because it's in this yellow anyhow. It's hard to believe that that violet is a component of this yellowish color that I mixed, isn't it? But it really is. And this little spot that was on the paper before, it's this little bit of a stain. But we're just gonna cover it with some darker color. And I think add a little more violet. There we go. Now it's kind of tucked away and hidden. A few splatters on the paper doesn't make the paper garbage. You can still use it. And I can add a little bit. I want to see what happens if I add a little bit more of that vibrant yellow as well. So right now you're probably not feeling that as a sky, and that's okay. We're just trying out ideas. And I think if we have a very warm sky, let's have a very cool landscape. And I'm thinking that we will try our dioxazine violet still. So we're really working with just a 2-color palette right now. And just make our hill right along here. Let's go a little bit bolder yet with that color. And the goal here is, I mean, the reason I go so nuts with changing color up and why I'm, being so experimental is that we really want to let our photo references be a tool for helping us create stronger paintings. We don't want them to boss us around. And so often I'll be working on a painting that is coming out of a photo reference, and I get about halfway through, and I'm kind of liking this flowing bit here. I get about halfway through and I realize I'm bored. I'm feeling locked into copying something that really doesn't have a lot of appeal for me. I can see my photo reference. I don't need to paint it. So at least not exactly the way it shows up. So because sorry, I'm just checking to make sure you can still hear me. Every now and then I need to glance back at my monitor, and then I completely lose train of thought. So because because our photographs do such a good job of capturing the actual details of the scene, I like to kind of change it up and ask questions and try to get a certain mood or feeling. And I'm having a lot of fun just dropping color into this beautiful wash. And the underpainting, those light lines that were originally on this dirty piece of paper, are actually contributing to my scene. They're guiding the shape of this hill, and they're showing through a little bit in these clouds, which I think I could probably use to my advantage as well. I'm just trying to figure out how. Maybe use them to guide the shape of my clouds. I'm going to add a little bit of ultramarine, because I want my sky to look different than my hill. So I'm adding this path of a different color. Not loving actually the ultramarine, it's a little too bright. So let's try that apatite, which is a little duller. And then go back to our original dioxazine gamboge mixture. And when you paint on good quality paper like this is Arches 140-pound cold press. You can see how much time I have to keep going in and adding color, and how beautiful the flow is as the colors flow and mingle on that moist paper. So that's kind of a very intriguing hillside. And this first hillside that I painted kind of looks a little boring when we come back to it. And this still needs to dry so I can paint, that crisper line to really define it. But I don't know, I feel like there's a little bit more excitement in this scene. And I think one thing I could do now is I could start Adding a little bit of water, maybe blotting in a few places so I have some variation in texture. And that always adds a little bit of interest. Gives my clouds a little bit more form. And I don't know, I think it's just kind of fun. And going crazy with your colors, using your reference photo as a jumping off point, it gives you a lot of, it's kind of outside the comfort zone. And I always think when we step outside of our comfort zone, we challenge ourselves and we break out of that rut. If you're never trying anything new with your painting, it makes it very hard to make big leaps ahead in learning. So I feel like when I try new things, and some of these color mixtures I tried, especially in this painting today, they really are outside of my comfort zone, and I'm really liking this area right here. There's a huge range of colors in there that they mingle in just a very interesting and intriguing way, and I think I'm going to be exploring more combinations with that Winsor Violet or Dioxazine Violet, the new Gamboge, and the blue apatite, because I think there's some beautiful things that are coming out of them playing together. And if I hadn't tried those colors, if I hadn't gone to that blue that is not a color I ordinarily use, I wouldn't have learned how it works with these other colors. So, you know, I'm out of my rut, I'm trying something new. It's gonna not only recharge, create this very interesting painting, but it's gonna recharge my more traditional watercolor paintings as well, as it gives me ideas for ways to kind of push my boundaries. So that's one reason I think it's really fun to try taking a simple landscape and then changing it up. Paint it one time the way you see it and then turn it on its head and you know, switch it around. Switching over to my, oops, sorry. I'm just going to switch right over to my camera screen here as Joe brings up any questions you guys might be asking. And then following this broadcast, now my other phone is ringing. Following this broadcast, I'm going to go and do another live video. After this video ends, I'm going to go right to a second live video where I'm going to do a book review on Watercolour 365, which is a new book by Leslie Redhead, who also happens to be a friend of mine. Taking a look, Marianne, I'm sorry you're late. Glad you could join us here. It's really always complicated for me to know how to set up this when we have our time zone change, because here in my little corner of the world, we don't change our clocks either, and I know everybody else seems to. So, taking a look at your questions, do I use black and white reference photos or are they in color? I generally choose color photos. Mostly because that's how my camera is set when I take them, and most of the time I'm looking at my photographs on my tablet or on my computer screen as I'm painting, because they're larger than a regular 4x6 photo. If you want to break away from the colors, it can be really helpful to have a black and white version as well. So when I'm working on a painting that it might be fairly complicated, a lot of elements in it, then that might be a time when I would print a black and white photo as well as a color one. So I have both, so I can really compare values. Other questions? Heidi asks, what do you do if you just aren't liking what's happening on the painting? That can be discouraging when you've invested a lot of time into your painting. But Heidi, what I like to do when I feel like a painting's not working, or when I feel stalled, or when I feel bored, is sometimes it just means I need to take a break if I'm not really sure what to do next. Sometimes it means I need to have faith that it's at an ugly duckling stage and I just need to keep working and it'll improve. And sometimes it means I need to take a risk. And that's my favorite time, is when my painting's just not working, or I think I've done something that's wrecked it, or this is not going to turn out. When I feel like this painting isn't going to work, that's when I get to be excited and take a big risk, because it's not working out anyhow, so there's nothing to lose. So I love that time when I can challenge myself. What if I threw a really dark color in that spot? to distract the eye from this area that's not working, or to cover up this area that's not working? Or what if I started pressing texture in, or change things up in a dramatic way? And those risks can make your painting a complete and utter failure, but it was already not turning out. Or it can be just the thing that gives you all kinds of new ideas, teaches you something, and makes your painting actually work out in the end. And those are great surprises when that happens. Further questions. I take my own photos. A Little Creative asks if the photos I'm sharing are ones that I've taken. I really prefer to take my own photos of places that I've actually been and have the feeling of, so I can capture not just what I see, but the feelings that I had when I was there, the thoughts that I thought, or the experience itself. Photos don't tell you everything, so if you have internal knowledge that you can put into your painting, that can be really helpful. Joy Hawkins asks if I've tried Yupo paper or White Nights watercolors. Yupo paper I haven't tried the White Nights watercolors. I probably should. I'd love to know what they're like. And the Yupo paper, I'm hoping I can do a video on sometime in the future. It won't be this month because we're on holidays. I do have new videos planned for the next 2 weeks. I'll have one on Tuesday of next week and the week after to make up for my not being here live as we're on holidays. When I'm in a dry spell and don't feel like painting, Diane asks, how do you motivate yourself? Well, first of all, Diane, I think you have to give yourself permission to be not painting if your heart really isn't in it. And I'm thinking particularly of a discussion I saw on a YouTube or Facebook watercolor group. A woman said she'd lost her husband and she hadn't been able to paint since then. And I think, when you're in a cycle of going through a hard time or a grieving process, it's really important to give yourself permission to just let everything go. And I think we've all probably been in a stage in our life where things weren't working the way they should, and so we couldn't connect with that part of ourselves. And it's okay. That is okay. If you really are just feeling like you're in a creative slump, however, or if you're wanting to get started and you just need a kick in the pants to recharge yourself, what I like to do is start really small. Paint a greeting card, work on postcard size paintings for a little while. Paint your coffee cup if you have no ideas. When you are actively using your creativity, even if it's just in a tiny way, I think that creativity, I like to say, is a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. So if you're feeling blocked, just give yourself permission to play and have fun, and just use it in some way. It doesn't have to be a big serious painting. And I think that often what blocks us is that pressure to create something really great. And so if you loosen up and just have fun, that's a really good way to keep moving creatively, even when you're feeling kind of blocked. Other questions. Judy Ament asks if I would use Payne's Gray for cloudscapes. I have, and I do, Judy. And hi, she's actually kind of a neighbor of mine. And Payne's Gray is really fun because it really responds well to like blooms and stuff. So if you're using Payne's Gray, it flows really well, and then you drip water in and it blooms really well also. Further questions? Thanks for the recommendations on supplies, Joy. Chris is saying you're on 2 types of antibiotics at the same time. You can't concentrate on painting. That doesn't sound fun at all. I hope you're taking your probiotics as well. We've had sickness roll through our family, and yeah, when there's different times in our lives where you just can't paint, and I know sometimes we really want to. I should mention, don't worry. Don't feel like your time spent not painting is wasted. I think as people who are creating, if you're looking at the world and thinking, how would I paint that? Though that pondering and that meditating on what you see can really inform your painting when you do get a chance and the motivation to paint again. Okay, we are basically, I'm going to try to wrap this up. Because I do have a lot of packing to do before we go on holidays tomorrow. In just a moment, however, as soon as this video ends, I'm going to restart another live session, just a short one, where I'm sharing a book review on Watercolour 365 by Leslie Redhead. And I also want to mention, because I'm not sure if everyone who's watching today is on my email list, I really encourage you to sign up for my mailing list. You can find the link to that on my website at angelafehr.com. The mailing list, I send out emails every week, and these emails are packed with content to help you. They share links to my current, whatever my next scheduled live broadcast is. I give tips. I give tips on watercolor, pep talks to motivate you, and also information on sales and promotions. They're the first to hear about any new courses. And I do want to encourage you to check out my new course, Photo Reference Mastery. This isn't a big course, but it's a course designed to help those of us, and that's most of us, who use reference photos in our art. When you're using a reference photo, it can be really easy to feel locked into that picture and just having to copy everything you see. And there are pros and cons to using reference photos, and we cover that in the course. I also cover ways to kind of tap into your personal style so that you can paint from reference photos and yet still be expressive and intuitive in your approach. This course, however, is not available for sale. I've packaged it with my Creating Landscapes in Watercolor course. This means that the nearly 500 students who are enrolled in that course already get the Photo Reference Mastery for free, and it means that anyone who enrolls in Creating Landscapes gets Photo Mastery as well. No additional cost. And there's a link to sign up for that in the information under this video. I also wanted to encourage you, if you saw my email, you'll know that Tropical Holiday, my other newer watercolor course, the introductory price is no longer available. It originally launched at $39 US, and it's gone up now to $49 US. If you missed that introductory rate, I do have a discount code for you, so you can still get it today if you use the discount code Late Bloomers, and I'll put the information for that in the description of this video as well. So I hate it when people miss out on a great deal. So that's all down below. And hang around. Joe's going to direct you to my second live session with my book review in just a moment. Thank you for joining me today. I feel like I've done a lot of talking already, but we're going to spend a few minutes talking about this great book from Leslie Redhead. So stick around on my channel, youtube.com/angelfehr, and we'll have that broadcast here in about 2 minutes.